Join the Coven. Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering my listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/GothicRose and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Just go to audibletrial.com/GothicRose to get started today. I'm a guard stationed at a secret government prison. A story written by Mr. Outlaw. Part 7. Now, even I'm confused, Adrian said before turning to Sandhu. What's going on here? Who the hell are you? Yeah, that's a good question, I added, also looking in his direction. Come on, man. I've known the guy for years, yet I couldn't begin to understand what he was planning here. Sandhu took a while to respond, and even then, it was less than satisfying. It's complicated, he finally spoke up. By the way, aren't you guys missing the show? I wasn't gonna force the guy to talk. Over the years, I've learned that doing so only leads to disingenuous answers. Besides, he was right. Jack was already rushing towards Wu. Come on, Wu, show me your kung fu. I'll beat you down with good old American boxing. He really thinks Americans invented boxing, huh? Adrian muttered. Instead, Wu opted to blast him back with his hand shotgun. Jack was sent flying into his support beam, demolishing it in the process. While he had taken no sustainable damage, there were now holes littered across the American flag printed on his chest plate. That sure got him pretty rattled. Oh, you messed up, buddy, he said, a deranged smirk drawn across his face. For the first time ever, Wu decided to speak. What did you think was going to happen? In an instant, they charged at each other. Given their respective power and speed, their combined movements were hardly comprehensible. But if I had to approximate the exchange, it went something like this. Jack lands across to Wu's helmet, cracking it slightly. Wu attempts to stab Jack with the large blade. It breaks on his arm. Jack presses forward, throwing a flurry of jabs at Wu's head. Most of them are blocked. Wu's counters with a kick to the ribs. It hurts Jack. Wu uses his railgun eyes, burning the side of Jack's cheek. And then the gauntlet is unleashed. Wu lands a brutal combination with steel-studded knuckles. Wu shoves a grenade into Jack's face. Wu pounds away at Jack's ribs with a spiked bat. Wu stabs Jack through the shoulder with an elbow blade. Wu snaps one of Jack's fingers off. Wu headbutts him. Wu picks him up and executes a hard takedown, destroying the walkway they're standing on and causing them to fall to the lower floor. And then Wu begins strangling Jack. He's got the advantage with his weapons, I said. There's no way Jack's turning it around. Adrian scoffed. The US didn't funnel billions into this guy for nothing. He's got a few tricks up his sleeves. And, oh boy, did he ever. Jack was frenetic as he struggled to break out of Wu's iron grasp. Screw you, he screamed before his right fist began glowing red. He let go of Wu's wrists, ramming his knuckles right into his throat instead. the first significant strike. I could see Wu's armor splinter as he was launched backwards, forced to release his grip. Still exasperated from the struggle, Jack pulled himself up, his fists smoldering like hell. At the same time, Wu was gasping for air himself. "How's that?" he said, holding his fist up while grinning like a man utterly unhinged. Suddenly, his left fist also began glowing, the only difference being that it was blue. "It's about to get gnarly," Jack said. "The stars and stripes style is immeasurable." What followed was an exchange of blurs. I could hear explosive bouts of clanking metal, white smoke and flickering sparks intercut with flashes of red and blue from Jack's fists. Two individuals at the pinnacle of power striking each other with everything that they had. After around an entire minute of hectic but incomprehensible fighting, both men had sustained significant damage. Wu's suit was covered in cracks and dents. With his right forearm and left thigh now exposed, there was also blood leaking through his fractured helmet. On the other hand, hardly an inch of Jack's body was unscathed. He was cut and swollen all over, with one of his eyes stabbed out and his right shoulder grated down to the bone. They stared each other down during their few seconds of fleeting recuperation, and then they were right back at each other's throats. Wu attempted to blast Jack in the face with his palm cannon, but the American managed to weave underneath the shot, throwing both fists into Wu's chest, causing his suit to shatter completely at that particular spot. His vitals were now exposed. Jack knew what kind of opportunity he had just created, indicative by the wicked grin on his face. In a matter of milliseconds, Jack pulled back one of his fists and struck Wu directly. Without his armor protecting him, that blow must have liquidized his insides. In any case, that's what I got from his reaction. In an instant, he collapsed in pain before being tossed over the rails onto an even lower floor as he clutched his sides in excruciation on the ground. Jack leapt down and stomped on his helmet, finally shattering that as well. He'd accomplished something that even the most sophisticated of weaponry would have had trouble doing. In a desperation move, Wu pulled out his shotgun and began spraying it upwards, forcing Jack to retreat, feeling pain that must have eclipsed the boundaries of unbearable. He pulled himself up, finally revealing his cut-to-hell visage through his broken helmet. "You're just a regular person underneath that suit, hey?" Jack said, panting. "How comical. You were too, before the experiment," Wu responded. Jack scoffed. "Is that what you think? That I'm just like you? A regular guy?" "Yes," Wu responded. "We weren't born special." Jack shook his head. "Why does that matter? Look, I'll give you one thing. You're strong. Hell, you even gave me a bit of a hard time. But your attitude is bull." Wu had trouble responding to that. "Sure, we weren't born special," Jack continued. "But we've changed ourselves, clawed our way up to the top." He paused for a moment. "No, you're not just a regular guy underneath that suit after all. And I wasn't just another person in the crowd before the experiment. They don't just choose any random jerk, you know? These are things that we've accomplished ourselves. Things that nobody could do. Why don't you understand that?" Another pause followed. The silence was broken when Wu reached over his shoulder, pulling out a terribly large red-orange sword, the Singularity Blade. "Jack Barnes," he began, "you seem unintelligent on the surface, but you've almost said something profound just now." Jack smirked at the pseudo-compliment. You're strong as well, Wu continued. I'll show you my respect by cutting you down with my ultimate weapon. I'm touched, Jack responded. I guess I'll have to show you the same courtesy. He closed his eye for a moment before opening it back up, revealing nothing but white underneath his lids. The red and blue radiating off his fists began extending up to his forearms, before quickly enveloping each side of his body entirely. You should be honored. I'm about to crush you with the full force of my American spirit. Two tremendously strong men, both now at the pinnacle of their own power, stood across from each other in full acknowledgement of each other's prowess. An earth-shaking clash was about to ensue. Wu went first, swinging the blade and releasing an obscure serpentine entity from its tip. It rushed forward with torrid speed, latching its claws onto Jack's arms and attempting to bite his head off. Jack responded by drilling his fist down the creature's throat. It bit down, puncturing his arm, but shattering its own teeth in the process. Jack and the creature fought brutally and relentlessly, with the latter seemingly growing in size as the battle endured. However, Wu himself was standing still. What's he doing? Why isn't he going after him? I thought out loud. He can't, Adrian responded. Look closely at him. It took me a second, but I understood. The punch that Wu had taken to the chest had essentially put him out of commission. In fact, at that moment, he was struggling to even stand up. He was relying on the singularity creature to get the job done. After some minutes, the beast had grown to an ungodly size, resembling some kind of colossal, ghoul-like dragon. It bit down on Jack's arm once again, taking it clean off this time. Jack shrieked in endurance-fueled pain, headbutting one of the dragon's eyes out in response. It roared in pain as it whirled backwards, utterly alienating its surroundings. It even took out a few cameras. Jack took the opportunity to reel in the frenetic beast, jumping up on its head and bashing away. Despite having half its face caved in, the dragon still managed to fling him into a wall, ramming what remained of his head into his torso moments later. A wave of blood busted from Jack's mouth before his lips curled back into a sadistic, unrelenting grin. He punched the creature's remaining eyes out before getting on top of it and rendering the rest of its head into a ghostly mush with nothing but his remaining fist. Just like that, the battle was over. As the dragon died, the blade shattered with it. Jack leapt down, back in front of Wu. He half chuckled, half groaned as he limped towards him. Lost an arm? Lost an eye? You really put me through the gauntlet, hey? Wu's expression was stone for a while. But it eventually turned into a grin. No malice behind it. He was simply acknowledging the indeterminable fighting spirit that Jack had put on display. Well, looks like my fate's been sealed, he said. Jack reciprocated the grin, breathing heavy through his teeth. Gotta say, you weren't a pushover. But in the end, America always wins. He finished Wu off with a quick strike to the head. As the mechanical menace dropped, Jack's body stopped glowing, and he began staggering away, his movements strained and delirious. In any case, he didn't make it too far. He dropped about 10 paces from Wu. That was fun, he muttered, slowly drifting off into the darkness. Even in death, his grin didn't waver. Dang it, Adrian said. Did they both have to die? Well, let's see if one of these other weirdos can make it out alive. I'd been so invested that I nearly forgot about the other fight that was going on. I turned my head, watching as Kente effortlessly strangled Senju. I killed your master with 3 strikes, and you're even weaker than him. Your effort is an insult. I'm going to kill... Kente struck the side of Senju's jaw and slammed his neck onto the ground, interrupting his sentence. I guess we'll never know what he was about to say. A real mystery there. But despite the overwhelming power gap, Senju kept rushing back at him, only to get abruptly beat down every single time. Damn! He shouted in frustration after taking another punch to the chest. Stop evading justice, Kente said. Your time's done. But then, an unexpected figure arrived on the scene. Hugo rushed into the frame, directing his own rush of blows at Kente. However, he reacted to them in the same way a regular man would have reacted to a mosquito bite. Hugo was subsequently knocked back, without much explicit effort on Kente's part. His scars were glowing like hell as he pulled himself back up. His eyes pursed with piercing fury. Why is he so ticked off? I thought to myself. Kale arrived moments later, yelling after Hugo. What the hell are you doing? I know you're crazy, but what the hell? He shouted. He's the one that killed my mentor, Hugo said, his voice shaking. The last good man on this earth, destroyed by the same evils he attempted to help. But he was foolish. There can only be response to the sin in this world. This jerk killed my master as well, Senju said, turning to Hugo. Let's bury him. Hugo sighed, clearly not excited at his prospective ally. Man, Kale said, staring up at Kente. This isn't fun anymore. All 3 of them tried attacking at once. No luck. Kente tanked each blow before striking each of them down in rapid succession. He grabbed Kale by the neck before tossing him at Senju, sending them both crashing into the wall. Damn! Kale yelled as he struggled to pull himself up. Yo, priest, what level of detachment are you at? Hugo exhaled. 99%. Damn! Kale muttered, looking up at the steadily but menacingly approaching Kente. So we're screwed. Not necessarily. I'm about 10 times stronger at 100% than I am at 99. I'm not sure the math checks out there, Hugo said, before taking another strike to the stomach. No matter, Hugo said. One of the biggest evils stands before us. Every measure must be taken. You're gonna freaking die, Kale uttered, being kept on his toes by repeated blows from Kente. Hugo's eyes flickered a deep red, almost like a literal fire was behind them. We're gonna die, regardless. Kente turned away from Kale and turned to Hugo. He squinted. Now I remember you. Hugo threw a cross so hard that it seemed to split the air molecules in its path. Despite managing to block it, Kente was still blasted backwards, skidding to a stop. He held his arm up, which had been badly mangled from the blow. He sneered at Hugo, his eyes growing crazier with every passing second. Evil must be eliminated. You are in no position to make that call, Hugo responded. They bolted at each other. The 2 traded blows, with Hugo slowly but surely overwhelming Kente. Kale could only watch in awe. Senju, on the other hand, yeah, kick his butt. But the more damage Kente took, the more wild he seemed to get. Hugo landed a 1-2 to his jaw and temple, drawing blood from his head, before finishing the combination by drilling a knee into his liver, nearly causing Kente to buckle on the spot. Why did you kill him? Hugo spat at Kente in between strikes. He was the last chance at salvation that this disgusting world had. Now bruised, bloody, and battered, Kente dropped to one knee. Hugo stepped in for the finishing blow. Or what I thought was going to be the finishing blow. Kente managed to catch the strike, surprising just about everybody watching. His forehead veins bulged as he looked up at Hugo, his face twisted in an inconceivable expression of demented wrath. I killed him because he stood in the way of justice. In a split second, Hugo was knocked backwards, having his chest completely caved in. What? He wheezed as he bent over, trying to funnel air into his lungs. He's stronger. Be careful. Kente picked him up and judo slammed over the rail before he could get that last sentence out. I never cringed as hard as I did while watching his spine get instantaneously bent into the worst possible shape.
Hugo!
Kale yelled, charging at Kente. A valiant but fruitless effort, he was picked up and brutally ragdolled into the walls and floors. Kente finished the ruthless display by slamming his back into the wall. Kale crumpled like a pancake, with every bone in his body just about broken. Recovering from that was going to be a tall order. Damn, he spurted out, unable to make another move. Suddenly, Senju was back on his own, heavily injured and looking far less confident than he was before. We can't let him win, Senju said, his expression a combination of frightened and resolute. Oh, you're not watching the kid anymore? What a surprise, Adrian said. I shook my head. I mean, what the hell are we supposed to do? Instead of answering my question, he just brushed by me before abruptly sprinting out the door. What the hell, man? I called after him. No use. He was already gone. I fumbled around in place for a moment. On one hand, I really didn't want to go out there. But on the other, he was my friend, and as much as I wanted answers, I also wanted to make sure he didn't do something he was going to have the chance to regret. After a few moments of frenetic contemplation, I found myself chasing after him. Where the hell are you guys going? I could hear Adrian calling out from behind me. At that point, he was the least of my concerns. Chills ran down my spine as I traversed across the blood-stained walls decorated by the mangled corpses of my former guards. It was a sight that I had experienced in my nightmares before. I'm sure just about every guard had. Seeing it in real life was jarring, to say the least. It sure had been one hell of a day, but the inevitable dusk finally seemed to be closing in. Part 8. Sendu, what the hell is going on? My shouts were in vain as he pressed ahead, traversing through the blood, guts, and gore left in the wake of the voids without a second glance. I chased him for what must have been 15 minutes before he halted to an abrupt stop. What are you? I gasped, in between breaths. But then I saw who we were standing in front of. The kid. He was still sitting tight in his cell, his eyes remaining glued to the floor. Sandhu just stood there for a moment and stared at him. "Ajay," he finally muttered. The kid, whose name was apparently Ajay, shook his head. I could see tears falling from his face as he did so. "No," he choked out. "I can't." Sandhu smiled, tears beginning to well up in his own eyes. "I know that I said you wouldn't have to, but," he began. I'm sorry. I promised that I'd get you out. Before I had no idea how. But there's a chance here. We can't avoid it now." Ajay looked up, utter fear pervading his expression. "I can't face him." Sandhu slowly approached him. "It's okay," he said. Ajay seemed to recoil at the seemingly innocuous statement. "It's okay," Sandhu repeated, kneeling in front of him. "Your gift is your own, your right to use." Ajay continued shaking his head. "You remember what happened?" "That wasn't your fault." "But it was." His voice was beginning to quiver. Sandhu grabbed Ajay by the face, looking him dead in the eyes. "You've been lied to by bad people. Those same people are here with us now. The ones that killed the people you love and trapped you in this place. Anybody at your age with your ability would have made that mistake. It's not your fault." Ajay wiped a tear from his face. "If I let it out, everybody's gonna die." Sandhu shook his head. "No, you've been practicing, and I've been watching, better and better every day now. It's time to be strong. Your father would have wanted that, no? He would have wanted you to face it head on." Ajay remained hesitant. "I'm sorry, but we're out of options here." Sandhu's tone had gone more serious. "The man who killed your family wants to kill you as well. I can't stop him. Nobody can. It's all up to you. What are you going to do?" Despite still looking at the floor, Ajay suddenly clenched a fist. I'm not sure if it was my imagination or what, but I could have sworn that there was a spike in the air pressure around us. Some kind of intense, overwhelming aura emanating from the kid's general vicinity. Or maybe I'd simply seen too much that day. Soon enough, Ajay was standing. Sandhu looked both proud and utterly terrified. He took a deep breath before turning to me. "It's a long story. I'll tell you all about it later. But what's about to happen?" He lowered his voice. "It's going to be dangerous. You don't have to come with us. Just hang back. Then after all this is over, we can all leave together." It was a vague warning, and one that didn't fill me with the highest degree of confidence. I could have told you, myself, that things were about to get dangerous. That much was obvious. I'd been watching that danger unfold over the course of an entire day. But now I had a decision to make. Did I really want to be in the thick of it? Did it even matter? Truth be told, I had been feeling the prospect of death looming over me ever since the first alarm sounded out. I didn't have too much time to think about it, though. Before I knew it, Ajay had taken off sprinting, a furious beat in his step. Sandhu hastily followed after, leaving me standing there with a million thoughts racing through my mind. I didn't want to be alone in that place, and I sure as hell didn't want to hang out with Adrian anymore. So I followed them. The kid was kind of running blindly, so Sandu had to direct him towards where Sanju was about to make his last stand against Kente. I was more or less certain that nothing but a gruesome scene would be waiting for us. And I was right. Once we got there, Kale was still a pile of flesh and bones against the wall, while Hugo could do nothing but lie still, his life undoubtedly hanging on by a thread. Along with them, Senju was flattened against the floor. Well, I'm fairly certain it was him. It looked like somebody had been run over by a steamroller. Kale and Hugo looked both beyond sullen, their faces wrought with bitter and painful defeat.
You guys come to finish the job?
Kale asked us before letting out a short chuckle.
Well, nothing's stopping you.
No, I stammered out. Are you guys alright? Stupid question.
Top condition, pal. Never been better.
Kale responded. Where'd he go? Senju spoke up.
The big psycho? He took off.
He stretched his neck out, gesturing towards the walkway on the other side of us.
Guy didn't even look human when he turned Buddy over there into a pancake, muttering stuff about finishing the job and executing justice. What a clown.
Thanks, Sandu muttered before turning to head off. Ajay was also starting to look a bit antsy. Something had certainly changed in his demeanor. Something dark.
Wait! Hang on! Are you going after him? Aren't you guys like guards or something? How's that gonna work out? And that kid, isn't he... What the hell's going on?
Kale called after us. Well, it's a bit complicated, I responded. But I think it'll work out. I wasn't so confident in reality. Kale scuffed and chuckled.
Right. Of course. Well, it's not like I want you guys to lose.
He smirked.
Go and take him down.
I smirked back and nodded.
But before you leave, do me one favor. Is the priest still alive? He hasn't said anything in a while, but I think I saw him twitching a bit.
I looked over at Hugo. Despite his dead expression, he was still blinking every now and then. Yeah, I responded. Kale rested his head on the wall and nodded.
Okay, good to know,
was all that he said. After that short exchange, we were off running to face the insurmountable wall known as Kente. While we were looking for him, he was sure as hell looking for us as well. As we moved, I tried to gauge what Sandu was thinking. It wasn't terribly clear from his expression, but I could tell his conviction in that moment was less than strong. Given what I knew, I could have viewed the situation from a lot of possible angles, many of which would have led to Sandu acting as a less than moral party. But there was lost context here. I knew the guy, and unless he had been acting all these years, there was only one conclusion I could have reached myself. For the sake of the kid, this was something we had to do. Hell, I never believed for a second that he was malicious in nature. My thoughts were running too fast. Before I knew it, we were standing right in front of Kente. His suit had been damaged pretty badly, and he had dried blood caked all over him, although I doubted that most of it was his own. But besides one of his forearms, he wasn't injured in the slightest, meaning that taking him out was going to be a tall order. But then again, I had no idea what the kid was capable of either. Kente sneered as he walked towards us, his bloodlust seemingly transferring into the physical atmosphere around us, putting a dark, sinking feeling in my gut. But all of his attention was on the kid. "I found you," he snarled. Sandhu looked at Ajay and nodded. "Ajay, it's time." No response. In fact, the kid was frozen on the spot, his eyes enlarged in sheer terror. I was afraid something like that was going to happen. "Oh, damn," Sandhu muttered before shaking Ajay's shoulders. "Come on, he's coming towards us. Ajay! Ajay!" His voice was getting exponentially more desperate. In reality, this whole move was likely a big gamble. Nevertheless, it was a gamble he was definitely aware of beforehand. With their backs against the wall, Sandhu stood firm in his promise to protect the kid. He exhaled before shielding Ajay and getting himself ready for a valiant but futile stand against Kente. "You think I won't kill a guard if they stand in the way of justice?" Kente boomed. Sandhu scoffed. "No, I think you'll kill just about anybody, you pig psycho." An oversized vein bulged in Kente's neck as he tensed his arm, ready to deliver a head-shattering blow. At that moment, I was simply frozen. I knew there was nothing I could do. However, as Kente put one foot back in preparation for the strike, a dark, ghost-like hand wrapped itself around his calf before pulling him down and dragging him around. I looked over at the perpetrator, a nightmare-inducing entity resembling a distorted gorilla with bulky, oversized arms. It dragged Kente on the floor, slamming him through a gauntlet of rails and pillars in the process. The gorilla creature didn't have the upper hand for long, though. Kente let out an unworldly shriek before chopping one of the creature's arms off and ramming his fist through its head. As the entity fell limp, some kind of portal opened up underneath it, pulling it through. From the shadows of an adjacent corridor, Ken stepped out. "You're not going to make this easy for me, are you, buddy?" he said, grinning. "I always knew you were evil," Kente growled. "I just have to eliminate everybody here." He was slowly but surely devolving into an overpowered primal rage-driven beast. "Ken, why are you—" Sandhu spoke up, sounding reasonably confused. Ken just shrugged. "A promise is a promise, remember?" More lost context. Just what the hell had Sandhu been doing over the years? "Look out!" Sandhu's warning had arrived at an opportune time. Kente had stepped forward, launching one of his colossal fists straight at Ken's head. Luckily for him, he managed to summon a creature to take the blow for him just in time. He dove out of the way of a follow-up strike seconds later. "Damn," Ken muttered. "This is going to be annoying." He looked up at Ajay. "Come on, kid. I know what you can do." "I can't," he muttered, cowering down and visibly trembling with fear. I've gotta kill. We're gonna die if you don't." I found myself shouting, "Listen to Sandhu, huh? There's no other options here." My outburst probably wasn't all too helpful, but it was my own instinctual fear speaking for me. During the split seconds where my attention wasn't trained on Kente, he had gotten within inches of me. Before I knew it, I was feeling his iron grip around my forearm. I could feel my bones being crushed in an instant. before I was tossed hard into the wall. My vision faded for just a moment before all of the pain hit me at once. If I was useless in a fight before, I was entirely out of commission now. I could hardly move as my body slid down the wall, flopping onto the floor. Damn it, I spat up, a wave of blood arriving with the word. I could only watch now. With the kids still being scared, there was really only one person capable of fighting. Ken opened up about 10 portals in a circle around him. Ugh, he winced, his forearm veins pulsating like hell, while a stream of blood began flowing down from his hairline and his nose. God, I hate doing this. All at once, a petrifying roster of esoteric, incomprehensible entities emerged from each one. From what I saw, there was a dark blue, human-sized eagle that seemed to be composed of ice. Some kind of colossal demonic samurai with a flaming sword. A 6-legged creature with large, jagged blades jutting out from each corner of its body. A zombified gunslinger seemingly left over from the Old West, carrying giant revolvers made out of writhing gray flesh. And a ghoulish humanoid with 4 horns, 5 eyes, 6 arms, and a giant glowing green eyeball on its torso, amongst many others. Ken sighed upon seeing the unsightly creatures he had summoned. Why couldn't I just have been a telekinetic or something? He'd assembled a horde that would have made even the strongest man's knees tremble. But Kente was hardly human anymore. He didn't hesitate for a second. He darted forward in a flash, pulverizing every one of the creatures that stepped up to face him, taking only a few small cuts and insignificant strikes in the process. That was until he got the horned guy with the eye in his torso. That one managed to catch Kente's punch with one of his many hands. Evil creature! He snarled before throwing across with his other hand. It was caught again. While Kente had run out of hands, the creature still had 4. It landed a quad combo of devastating punches to Kente's face and upper chest, causing his head to snap back, blood spurting from his eyes and nose. However, his head came back as quickly as it went, drilling into the eye creature's temple and destroying 2 of its eyes. They were both ticked now, the synchronized primal roars before blasting each other with a series of catastrophic strikes. Neither of them bothered with any defense, or even any kind of strategy for that matter. They were simply out to deal as much damage as possible, hitting each other with everything they had. During the exchange, I began noticing something strange about Kente's appearance. He was taking a metric ton of damage for sure, but the difference didn't only stem from his wounds. He was changing. His veins were beginning to squirm underneath his skin, almost like trapped snakes trying to burst out. On top of that, he seemed to be getting bigger. In fact, he had been getting bigger ever since he fought Wu. He towered over Sandu, whom he was only supposed to have 2 inches on. Now he was even dwarfing the eye creature, who had been comparable size to him mere minutes ago. What the hell is this guy? I wondered out loud. Sandu had undoubtedly noticed it as well. I could see his eyes widening in terror at the sight. The creature lowered its head before rushing at Kente horn first. It rammed all 4 of them into his abdomen, managing to dig each of them about an inch into his flesh. Kente's roars had also changed. They had lost any sense of humanity. He was truly in the process of transitioning into a legitimate, bona fide monster. He had begun drifting away from conventional martial arts. He stuck his fingers out, thrusting 2 of them into the creature's eyes before gouging them out in a bloody, slimy mess. Without giving an inch, he followed up by sinking his teeth into the creature's chest, tearing out chunks of pulsating green flesh. He finished the deadly combination by drilling his knee into the creature's torso eye, taking it out while dissolving his own flesh and bones in the process. As he began to collapse, he grabbed the creature by the neck and took it down with him, pulling it into a brutal, one-legged guillotine choke. He had exerted so much pressure that its head popped off completely after a few seconds. Ken was starting to look very worried. With blood still dripping from his nose, he summoned another portal, in which a humanoid squid creature emerged. No use, it was taken out by one swipe from Kente, who blitzed it from a one-legged crawl-run hybrid. "Oh God!" was all that Ken managed to get out before being picked up and slammed savagely onto the floor. That would have been the end for him as well, had he not summoned another portal underneath his back at the last moment, allowing himself to land on the soft body of some kind of slime creature, as opposed to the hard metal. He rolled away, hardly managing to dodge a follow-up stomp that not only disseminated the creature, but the floor itself. Now wheezing and bloody all over, Ken looked up at Sandu, his face twisted in fearful desperation. No, not at Sandu. He was looking at the kid. "Come on," he muttered. "I know you can do it." The kid's expression didn't waver, no spark returning to his frightened eyes. "It's hopeless," I thought to myself. Do your memories really flash before your eyes when you think you're about to die? Well, some of them do, the ones worth remembering. An attempt to justify the way that you lived, the decisions that you've made. You come to one daunting realization. You were there, in the midst of the mystery known as life itself. And now it was all about to fade. As another tear began rolling down the kid's cheek, I could feel one rolling down my own. Ken sighed. "I know you're scared, but we don't have any time here. Please." Sandu put his hand up, stopping Ken mid-sentence. He had a stone-like expression on his face. "It's happening." Ken looked confused. "What?" I wasn't quite sure of the answer myself, but I got the gist of it. Ajay's body was beginning to visibly vibrate, or something to that effect. It had started out slow enough, but seemed to intensify drastically with every passing second. Before long, his body had become a dark, formless, stationary blur. From within that blur, 2 sharp, burning, red eyes surfaced. And then I could feel the floor begin to tremble around me.